The Great Hall of the Galactic Council was the largest room in the known galaxy. It was shaped like a giant bowl, with thousands of seats curving up the walls. 143 different alien species sat in those seats. Some had 4 arms. Some had no arms at all. Some breathed water. Some breathed gases that would kill a human in seconds. But on this day, every single one of them was looking at the same place. They were looking at the small bench at the bottom of the bowl. They were looking at one human woman. Her name was Ileana Vasquez. She was the human ambassador to the council. She was 64 years old. Her dark hair had streaks of gray. Her left hand shook a little when she was tired. She had been tired for many years now. She wore a simple dark suit and no jewelry. She sat alone on the bench. No other humans were allowed in the room today. The council had ordered it. At the top of the room stood the speaker of the council. His name was Venek Ix. He belonged to the oldest species in the galaxy, a tall, thin people called the Shothari. They lived for 900 years. They never raised their voices. They never showed strong feelings. Venek Ix was over 600 years old. He had seen many things, but today, he was about to do something his species had not done in 12,000 years. He was about to declare a war. Venek Ix lifted a thin paper in his long blue fingers. The room became quiet. Even the breathing tubes of the gas-breathing aliens seemed to slow down. He began to read. His voice was soft, but every speaker in the Great Hall carried it to every ear. He spoke of crimes. He said the humans had built secret weapons. He said the humans had made their soldiers stronger, using forbidden science. He said the humans had built 3 large bases far past their borders, in dark places where no council ship could see. He said the humans had broken many treaties. He said the humans were a danger to the peace of the galaxy. Then he spoke the words that no species had heard for many lifetimes. He said the council was now at war with the human confederacy of Sol. He said the war would not end until humanity was reduced to a state before space travel. He gave the humans 1 cycle, which was about 1 Earth year, to lose all their ships, all their stations, and all their advanced tools. If they did not agree, the council fleets would do it for them. The room waited. Every eye looked down at Ileana. The council had done this many times before. They had declared softer punishments on other young species. Every time, the species had begged. Every time, they had cried. Every time, they had asked for mercy. The council expected the human ambassador to do the same. Ileana sat very still. She looked at the paper in front of her. She looked at her shaking hand. Then she looked up at Venek Ix, and she smiled. It was not a big smile. It was small. It was tired. It looked almost grateful, like a person who had been holding a heavy bag for a long, long time, and was finally allowed to put it down. At last, she said. Her voice was soft, but the speakers carried it to every corner of the bowl. She stood up. She gathered her papers neatly. She tucked them under her arm. She bowed to the council in the exact way the rules said she must. Not too deep, and not too shallow. Then she turned and walked out of the Great Hall. Her footsteps were the only sound. The doors at the back of the room slid open. They slid shut behind her. The room stayed quiet for a long time. On the second seat of the third ring, a Threx admiral named Sir Veckel watched the doors close. He had 4 eyes, and all 4 were narrow. He had served in the council fleet for 80 years. He had read every report on humans that the council had ever made. He had argued against this war for many months. He believed the humans were not as weak as they pretended to be. He had been told he was being foolish. Now he watched the empty bench. He watched the closed doors. He thought of the small smile on the human woman's face, and for the first time in his long life, he felt a cold feeling in his chest. The feeling had no name in his language. Far above the chamber, on the orbital platform that held the Great Hall, Ileana stepped into a small human shuttle. The pilot was a young woman in a plain gray uniform. She did not greet the ambassador. She did not need to. She had her orders. She had been ready for this day since the day she was born. Ileana sat down. She closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of all the years, 60 years, of pretending. 60 years of bowing and smiling and saying yes to laws that were chains. 60 years of secret meetings in dark rooms, of plans inside plans, of children raised on whispered promises that one day, the cage would open. She opened her eyes. She took out a small black device from her pocket. It had only one button. She pressed it. The device sent a single message across the dark space between the stars. The message was only 2 words long. It was not in any language the council could read. It was in an old human tongue. And the words were simple. Harvest is ready. The shuttle's engines came to life. The little ship pulled away from the council platform. It turned toward the deep dark, toward the long road home to Earth. Ilyana looked through the small window at the stars. She was still smiling, and in many places far from the Great Hall, in places the council did not know about, other humans were getting the message. A shipyard worker in the cold rocks of Ceres looked up from her tools. An old admiral on a farming planet put down his cup of tea. A scientist in a hidden lab smiled the same small smile. A grandfather reading to his grandchildren stopped, kissed them on the head, and stood up. A young pilot in a hidden hangar climbed into a ship that did not officially exist. All of them were thinking the same thing. At last, back in the Great Hall, the council had still not moved. Venek Ix, the old speaker, finally lowered the paper in his blue hand. He looked at his fellow elders. He saw on their faces the same thing he felt in his own old chest. They had expected fear. They had received a smile. They had expected begging. They had received a polite bow. They had expected weeping. They had received 2 soft words. Something was wrong. Something had been wrong for a very long time, and they had not seen it. Send the fleet, Venek Ix said quietly. His voice was not as calm as before. Send it now. The plan must not wait. On the high seats of the chamber, the elder Shothari nodded. The order went out. Across many star systems, the great council fleet began to gather. 300 warships, the largest force in 4,000 years. They would move on Earth. They would teach the humans, as so many young species had been taught, that the council's word was law. That was the council plan. It was a plan that had worked 117 times before. This time, it would not work. For Admiral Cervical knew, deep in his careful old heart, that something was very, very wrong. He had spent the last 4 years studying every word humans spoke. He had read their old books. He had watched their old films. He had seen something in them that the other council elders did not see. He had seen a people who could lie with their whole body, with their whole heart, with their whole life, if the lie was big enough and the prize was great enough. He had seen this in their stories. He had seen this in their history. He had once tried to warn the council. They had told him he was being silly. Humans, they had said, were a small and simple people, easily handled, easily reduced. And so, with a heavy heart, Admiral Cervical boarded his great ship, the Patient Star, and gave the order to lead the fleet to Earth. He did not know what was waiting for him. He only knew that whatever it was, the council had earned it. They had pushed and pushed for 60 years, and a tired old human woman had smiled at last, and somehow, that smile felt to him like the moment before a great wave breaks on a stone shore. He would not be wrong. To understand why Ilyana Vasquez smiled, one had to go back. Back 60 years, to the day humans first met the Galactic Council. Back to a young woman in her 20s with sharp eyes and a quick mind, who was sent as a junior helper to the human team that joined the council for the first time. In those days, Ilyana was full of hope. The humans had just learned how to travel between stars. They had reached out into the dark, and the dark had answered. The council had come to greet them. The council ships were huge and beautiful. The council leaders were calm and wise. They spoke of peace. They spoke of trade. They spoke of one big family of stars. The humans were given a place at the council. They were given laws to follow. The laws were many and strict. Humans could not build certain kinds of weapons. Humans could not study certain kinds of science. Humans could only travel along marked roads in space. Humans had to share all of their new ideas with the council before using them. The leaders of Earth signed the papers. They were thankful. They thought the rules were fair. They thought the rules were the price of peace. Ilyana, in those days, thought so too. But she was a careful young woman. She liked to read old papers. She liked to ask questions. After a few years working at the council, she began to notice things. She noticed that some species in the council were very, very strong, and some were very, very weak. The strong species were the old ones. The weak species were the younger ones. There seemed to be no middle. She started to read the histories. Not the public histories the council shared in school books. The old papers, in dusty corners of the great library on Velirax Prime. The old reports. The old votes. Things that were not hidden, but were boring enough that no one looked at them. And there she found the pattern. Every young species, when it joined the council, was given rules. The rules were always for good reasons. To protect peace, to stop danger, to help the species grow safely. But over time, more rules were added. New crimes were found. New punishments were given. Slowly, very slowly, the young species lost more and more of what made them strong. Their fleets shrank. Their science slowed. Their numbers stopped growing. After 200 or 300 years, they were small and quiet and gentle, and they did whatever the council asked. The council had a word for this. They called it gentling, like training a wild animal until it would eat from your hand. Ilyana saw what was coming for humans. She saw it clearly. She was 27 years old, and she sat alone in the dusty library and cried. Then she dried her eyes. She copied her notes. She took them home to Earth. She thought no one would believe her. She was wrong. The leaders of Earth listened. They had been worried too. They had felt the chains tightening, year by year, rule by rule, but they did not know what to do. The council was too big. The council was too strong. To fight the council openly would mean death. To run away was not possible. There was no place to run. It was a man named Admiral Daniel Okoro who first said the words. He was an old soldier with a kind face. He said them in a quiet meeting in a small room under the city of Geneva. He said, "We will not fight them. We will not run from them. We will pretend." "Pretend what?" someone asked. "Pretend to be what they want us to be," said the admiral. "Pretend to be slow. Pretend to be small. Pretend to be tame. We will smile and bow and sign every paper they give us. And while we are smiling, we will build the things they think they have stopped us from building. We will build them where they cannot see. We will build them in the dark places between the stars. We will build them for so long and so well that when the day comes, when they finally drop the mask and show us the chain, we will be ready." There was a long silence in the small room. Then the leaders of Earth, one by one, agreed. This was the start. This was the day the great pretending began. It was 60 years before Venick Ix would stand in the Great Hall and read his paper. 60 years was a long time. But for what humanity planned to do, 60 years was barely enough. The plan was simple, but it needed many people. It needed honest faces and silent hearts. It needed scientists who would publish slow, weak papers in front of the council and do their real work in hidden labs. It needed builders who would build pretty empty stations for the council to inspect, and real fortresses where no one was looking. It needed soldiers who would train in old uniforms with old rifles, and then, in private hours, train with weapons the council had never imagined. It needed parents who would teach their children two histories, the public one and the true one, and trust those children to keep the secret. And it needed leaders, diplomats who could go to the council year after year and lie with a smile and never break. Ilyana Vasquez was the youngest of those leaders. Many things were done in those 60 years. The humans built two civilizations on top of each other. The visible one looked exactly the way the council wanted. Slow ships, old factories, friendly farming worlds, polite ambassadors who always agreed. The hidden one was different. It lived in hollowed-out asteroids, in fake debris fields, in the deep cold around dead stars. It built ships of strange shapes. It studied things the council had banned thousands of years ago. It made weapons no council mind had ever dreamed of. There was a key idea in the hidden program. The humans had been cut off from the council's shared science. So the humans had to invent new science of their own. Without committees, without rules, without the safe and slow path the council loved. The hidden human scientists worked like the wild inventors of old Earth. The ones who built airplanes in barns and rockets in deserts. They tried things that should not work. Sometimes they died. Sometimes they made wonders. Most of all, They made weapons. But not the kind the Council was watching for. Not bigger guns. Not faster missiles. Different things. Things that broke the rules of how war was supposed to be fought. Things designed for one job. And one job only. To break a fleet that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. All through this time, Ilyana climbed the ranks. She married Daniel Okoro's son. She had 2 children. She lost her husband to an accident in space. She kept working. She became the chief diplomat. She became the ambassador. She bowed and smiled at every council session. She signed every new rule. She apologized for every false crime. She let them think she was weak. She let them think humanity was almost broken. And every night, in her small room in the embassy, she wrote in a private journal, page after page, year after year. The same wish, in different words. Let them say it. Let them finally say it out loud. Let them declare the war they have been hiding under their treaties. Let them drop the mask first. Let them give us the right. For 60 years, she waited. For 60 years, she smiled and bowed and lied. For 60 years, she watched her children grow up in a world that was a stage play, and her grandchildren after them. On the day Venek Ix stood up and read his paper, Ilyana was a tired old woman. Her hands shook. Her hair was gray. She had carried the weight for so long. And then, finally, the council had said it. They had said the word, war. That was why she smiled. Not because she wanted blood. Not because she hated them. But because the long pretending was over. Because the cage had at last opened its own door. Because now, after 60 years of darkness and lies, humanity was free to be honest. And humanity was about to be honest in a way the council would never forget. The 2 words moved across human space faster than any council scout could follow. Harvest is ready. They moved through hidden channels, through coded songs played on civilian radios, through patterns of lights on innocent-looking buildings. Within 1 hour, every important human knew the war had started. There was no panic. There was no rush. The plans had been ready for 2 generations. People simply began to do what they had practiced. On the green farm worlds where council inspectors often visited, families packed small bags. They walked to barns and warehouses and old factory buildings. They stepped through doors that did not look like doors. The doors led to tunnels. The tunnels led to deep underground stations. The stations had ships waiting. The ships took them to safe places no council map had ever recorded. Behind them, the farms still ran. Robots tended the crops. Speakers played the sounds of human voices. From space, every council inspector would see a happy, quiet farm world, just as they always had. On the visible factory worlds, the same thing happened. Workers smiled at the morning shift bell, then walked through hidden doors and disappeared. Their machines kept running. Their machines had been running themselves for years. The council had never noticed. On the orbital ports, the polite human freight ships kept coming and going. But now, inside their cargo holds, things were different. Where there had been crates of grain, there were now soldiers in light gray armor, holding weapons of strange design. Where there had been water tanks, there were now small, fast attack ships, ready to be dropped into space at the right moment. The council saw none of this. The council saw exactly what humans had taught them to see for 60 years. A peaceful, slow people, living quietly on a few small worlds. Ilyana's shuttle reached Earth 3 days after she left the Great Hall. She did not go to a city. She did not give a speech. She went to a small house on the coast of West Africa, where she had been born. Her older sister still lived there. Her sister gave her tea. They sat on the porch and watched the sea. "How long?" her sister asked. "A few months," Ilyana said. "Maybe less. The fleet from the council is already coming. Are you afraid?" Ilyana thought for a long time. Then she shook her head. "I am tired. I am very tired. But I am not afraid." Far away, the council fleet was already on the move. It was the largest fleet in 4,000 years. 300 warships. Some were as big as cities. They came from 20 different species. They flew the colors of the council. Their job was to enter the human soul system, scare the humans into surrender, and begin the work of taking apart the human civilization, piece by piece. At the head of the fleet was Admiral Survekel of the Threx. He was the same Threx who had watched Ilyana smile in the Great Hall. He had not asked for this command. The command had been forced on him because he was the best officer the council had. He was careful. He was patient. He read every report twice. His 4 eyes missed very little. In his private cabin on his flagship, the long, sleek vessel called Patient Star, he sat alone with old papers. Reports about humans, going back to the day they were first met. He looked for clues. He looked for things that had not made sense at the time. He found many. A factory closed, for no clear reason. A scientist who died young and whose work was never published. A trade route that lost 2 ships in a strange spot and was never used again. Small things. Little odd notes in the margins of 60 years of history. He felt the cold feeling in his chest grow stronger. He thought of the human woman's smile. He told his second in command to slow the fleet's approach. "Sir," his second said, "the council has ordered fast advance to shock the humans into surrender." "The humans," said Sir Veckel quietly, "are not going to surrender. We will not shock them. They are waiting for us. I do not yet know what they are waiting with. So we will be slow. And we will be careful. And we will see." His second did not argue. It took the council fleet 2 months to reach the edge of human space. 2 months was a long time for such a large fleet. But Sir Veckel sent scouts ahead at every step. He was looking for traps. He found none. He found nothing. The space ahead of him was empty. This made him more worried, not less. On the day the fleet reached the heliopause, the cold edge where the wind of the human sun met the wind between the stars, Sir Veckel stood on the great window of his bridge. Around him, his ship spread in careful patterns. Ahead of him, the Sol system glowed quietly. 300 warships waited for his order to advance. He gave it. The fleet moved in. They expected to see ships, defense platforms, mines, anything. They saw nothing. The orbits where human stations should have been were empty. The bright bands of human industry around the inner planets were dark. The radio calls from human cities still came through, normal and calm, as if nothing was wrong. But the human warships, the ones the council knew about, were not where they should be. They were not anywhere. "Where are their ships?" the second in command asked, his voice tight. "Not here," said Sir Veckel. "That is impossible. Our scans show no ships within 1 billion kilometers of any major human world." "Yes," said Sir Veckel. "Impossible. And yet, here we are." He ordered his fleet into a tight defensive shape. He ordered every scanner turned to full power. He ordered every gunner to stand ready. He waited. For 3 hours, nothing happened. The council fleet drifted toward the inner system. The lights of Earth and Mars and the moons of the gas giants twinkled in the distance. It was beautiful. It was wrong. Then his communication officer turned, with his eyes very wide. "Sir," he said, "a single small ship is approaching from behind Jupiter. It is not armed. It is sending a clear signal." "On screen," said Sir Veckel. The screen lit up. There was Ilyana Vasquez. She was sitting in a simple cabin, in a chair like any other. She wore the same dark suit she had worn in the Great Hall. She looked tired and kind. She raised a hand in a calm, friendly wave. "Hello, Admiral," she said. "Thank you for coming so far. I would like to ask you, with great respect, to please turn around. Take your fleet home. There is still time. After this hour, there will not be time." Sir Veckel's 4 eyes narrowed. "Ambassador," he said carefully, "you know I cannot do that. I have my orders." "I know," Ilyana said. Her smile was small and sad. "I had to ask." "Ambassador," he said, "where are your ships?" She looked at him. Her dark eyes held his. For a moment, he thought he saw something very old in them. Not anger, not hate. Sorrow. "Everywhere," she said. Then the screen went dark, and the lights of Sol began to change. At first, Sir Veckel did not understand what he was seeing. The space around his fleet, which had been quiet and empty just a moment ago, was now full of small lights, not stars. The lights were too close, too bright, too many. They moved in patterns. They blinked in patterns. They were everywhere. His scanner officer turned slowly. His face was the color of cold water. "Sir," the officer said. There are ships. Many, many ships. They have been here all along. We did not see them. Our scanners did not see them. They were hidden in some way our science cannot read. How many? Said Cervical. The officer looked at his screen. He swallowed. He did not want to say the number. How many? The admiral asked again. Sir, the officer whispered. The number is too large. The number cannot be right. There are more than the lights of stars in this part of the sky. There are thousands, tens of thousands. They are all around us. Cervical stood very still. He looked through the great window. His 4 eyes saw what no council eye had ever seen. The dark of human space was not dark. It had only been pretending. Now it had stopped pretending. He thought of 60 years. 60 years of polite human ambassadors. 60 years of slow human factories making old-style ships. 60 years of council inspectors signing happy reports. He thought of the small things humans had always asked for, and how they had always been a little less than what the rules allowed. So polite, so humble, so careful. And in those 60 years, while the council watched the front door, the humans had built all of this in the back garden. He felt no anger. He felt almost a kind of respect. He had warned his people. He had been right. It did not matter now. Sir, the officer said. Shall I order weapons free? Cervical did not answer at once. He watched the lights move. They were not yet attacking. They were waiting. He understood, in a slow, cold way, that they were giving him a moment. To think, to choose, to see. He thought of Ileana Vasquez. Her tired smile. Her sad eyes. Everywhere, she had said. He understood her now. He understood her completely. Hold weapons, he said quietly. Sir, hold them, said the admiral. They are about to teach us what they have learned. We will learn what we can. The fight, if there is one, will not last long. He turned from the window. He sat down in his command chair. He folded his hands. He waited. He had served the council for 80 years. He had been a careful officer. He had read every report. He had begged his people not to push the humans this far. None of that mattered now. He could only sit and watch the moment that history would remember as the end of one age and the start of another. Across the deep dark, Ileana Vasquez sat in her own small ship. She watched the same lights through her own small window. Her hand had stopped shaking. Her face was very calm. She thought of her grandfather, who had been a young man on the day the humans first met the council. She thought of her grandchildren, who had grown up in the great pretending. She thought of all the people, on all the worlds, who had carried the heavy bag with her for 60 years. It is time, she said softly, to no one but herself. And she gave the next order. It started with the council ships at the edges. The smaller patrol vessels at the back of Cervical's fleet went silent first. Not destroyed, not exploded. Just silent. Their engines stopped. Their lights went dark. Their crews could not understand why. Every system they tried gave the same answer. Power was there. Fuel was there. The orders had been given. But the ship would not respond. It was as if the ships had simply decided to rest. Cervical watched the silence spread through his fleet like a slow wave. 10 ships, 20, 30. He shouted orders. He demanded answers. His engineers had none. They had never seen anything like it. The ships were not damaged. The crews were not hurt. The ships were just stopped. Then, far across the empty space, his scanners began to show new things. The space around the council fleet was no longer empty. It had never been empty. It had only seemed empty. Now, all around them, in every direction, ships began to appear. Not in flashes of arrival, not in jumps from far away. They were already there. They had been there the whole time. The humans had hidden them with science the council did not understand. The human ships were not built like council ships. Council ships were beautiful, smooth, and shaped like sea creatures. Human ships were sharp and strange. Some looked like long needles. Some looked like flat plates. Some looked like nothing at all, like a part of space had been folded into a shape. There were thousands of them. Cervical did not panic. He had not panicked once in his 80 years. But he understood, in that moment, that he had brought his fleet into a death. He gave the order to fight. The battle that followed was not really a battle. It was a teaching. The humans did not destroy ships. They turned them off. They opened airlocks they could not have opened, and let crews step out into rescue tubes. They reached into engines and made them sleep. They reached into shields and made them fall. Ship after ship of the Council fleet went dark, with every soul still alive inside. Some Council ships fired back. Their weapons hit human ships and did nothing. The bolts of light passed through them like through smoke. Some weapons found targets and exploded, but the human ships had no skin in those places, only fields of energy that bent and let the bolts pass. Sir Veckel watched his fleet die without dying. He thought of his enemies, hiding in the deep dark for 60 years, building these things in silence. He thought of the human ambassador's tired smile. His own ship, the Patient Star, was still untouched. He understood why. Ilyana wanted him to see. After 3 hours, it was over. 300 Council warships floated, dark and quiet. Their crews were safe. Their guns were cold. Most of them had never even gotten a clean shot. The largest fleet in 4,000 years was now a field of sleeping metal. Then a single human ship slid up next to the Patient Star. A docking tube reached out. A woman in a gray uniform walked aboard. She was not Ilyana. She was a captain named Mei Tanaka. She was polite. She bowed in the Threx way, which surprised the Admiral very much. "Admiral," she said in his own language, "on behalf of the human people, I ask for your surrender. Your crews will not be harmed. Your ships will be returned, in time. We have no wish to keep them. We have no wish to keep anything that is yours." Sir Veckel looked at her for a long moment. Then he gave his sword, the symbol of his command, into her hands. "What will you do now?" he asked. "We will end the cage," she said simply. While the Council waited in shock for news of its great fleet, news that did not come, the humans moved. They moved fast. They moved everywhere. There were many things in Council space that humans had been planning to break for 60 years. The Council kept records of all the rules placed on every species. Those records were stored in great archive moons, deep in old core systems. Human ships went to those moons. They did not destroy the records. They copied them. Then they wiped them. Across the galaxy, the chains began to fall. The Council had small enforcement stations near the worlds of every gentled species. These stations watched for forbidden science, for forbidden weapons, for population growth past Council limits. They reported everything to the Council. They could destroy a city if a forbidden ship was built there. Human ships went to these stations, one by one. They turned off their guns. They opened their hatches. They sent the workers home. At each station, the humans broadcast a short message in many languages. "Your watcher is gone. Your rules are over. We will not replace them. We will not stay. Build what you wish to build. Become who you wish to become. We are not your masters." On a small green world called Keth, far from the human core, a young engineer named Tuan Sai watched her sky change. The Council enforcement station that had hung over her people for 400 years went dark. A single human destroyer flew past it like a needle through cloth. The destroyer sent the message in 70 languages. Then it flew on. Tuan Sai stood on a hillside near her home, looking up. The Cathari were a small people with soft fur and large, gentle eyes. 400 years ago, the Council had voted that the Cathari could not have nuclear power. The Council had said the Cathari were not ready. The Cathari had begged for it. The Cathari had prayed for it. The Cathari had been told no, no, and again no, for 400 years. Tuan Sai watched the human ship vanish into the dark. She did not understand all of what had happened, but she knew her sky had changed. She put her hands over her face. She wept. She did not entirely know why. Around the galaxy, hundreds of young species had moments like this. Some celebrated, some panicked, some did not believe what was happening. A few, fearing the new power of the humans, ran into the arms of the dying Council and begged for help. The Council could give none. The Council was breaking apart. In the Great Hall, where Venick Ix had read the war paper, the Council members shouted at each other for the first time in 9,000 years. The old species, the gentle gardeners, were in shock. They cried out that the humans must be stopped. They cried out that the humans were a danger. They cried out that the humans would replace them and become the new chains. But the younger species in the council, the ones still under rules of their own, looked at each other in a new way. They had heard the human messages. They had seen the chains falling on their cousins. Some of them stood up and walked out of the Great Hall. They did not return. After 11 months of careful war, Ilyana Vasquez came home to the Great Hall one more time. She came alone again, just as she had on the first day. She walked the same path to the same bench. She sat in the same place. This time, the Great Hall was half empty. Venek Ix was still there. He looked older. His blue skin had gone gray at the edges. He had aged 10 years and 11 months. He stood up slowly. He waited. Ilyana looked at him. Her hands no longer shook. Her face was calm. She did not smile. "Speaker," she said gently, "I have come to ask you to end the war. You have already won it," he said. His voice was thin. "Yes," she said, "but you have not yet lost it. There is a difference. Today, I would like to make sure you understand that difference. We are not here to take your seat. We are not here to take your place. We are not here to be your new gardeners. We came to break the cages. The cages are broken. We are going home." There was a long silence in the half-empty room. Then Venek Ix, slowly, very slowly, lowered his head. The peace was strange. There were no parades. There were no great speeches. There were no songs of victory. The humans went home as quietly as they had gone to war. Their fleets came back into hidden ports. Their soldiers took off their armor. Their great hidden civilization, built in 60 years of silence, stepped out into the open at last. For the first time in human history, no one had to pretend. The old council was dissolved by its own surviving members. They voted, with sad, slow voices, to end the body that had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. In its place, they built something new. It had no enforcement fleet. It had no power to declare war on a member species. It had no power to make rules about science or population or weapons. It was a meeting place, a talking place, nothing more. Humanity took a single seat in this new meeting place. Just one seat, like every other species. Ilyana herself cast the first human vote. The vote was on whether the new body should have any power to punish a member species. She voted no. The new body had no such power. By her own hand, she made sure of it. After the vote, she stepped down as ambassador. She was 65 years old now. She went home to her sister's house on the coast. She walked on the beach in the mornings. She read books in the afternoons. She wrote letters to old friends in the evenings. She was, at last, allowed to rest. The galaxy did not become a paradise. Ilyana had never thought it would. The freed species struggled in many different ways. Some of them, who had been gentled for thousands of years, did not know what to do with their new freedom. They stood blinking in the sunlight, like people coming out of a long cave. Some of them built wonders. Some built terrible things. Some built nothing at all and waited, hoping someone would come and tell them what to do. No one came. The humans had gone home and stayed there. On Keth, the small green world, the Cathari spent 10 years arguing about whether to build nuclear power. There were many fights. There were 2 small wars between cities. 3,000 Cathari died in those wars. It was a terrible time. Then the arguments cooled. The Cathari built their first nuclear plant. They learned. They made mistakes. Some of their mistakes hurt people. They learned more. They built better plants. They began to make their own discoveries, things no council mind had ever thought of, because the Cathari minds were not like council minds. Tuan Sai, the young engineer, became an old engineer. She lived to see her people walk on their first moon. She wept again on that day, the same way she had wept the day the human ship freed her sky. By then, she understood the tears better. In her old age, she was visited by a young human historian named Demetrius. He had traveled the galaxy, collecting stories of the war and the freedom that came after. He sat with her in a small wooden room and asked her many questions. At one point he asked her, "Was it worth it? The wars between your cities, the 3,000 who died. Was the freedom worth that price?" Tuan Sai was quiet for a long time. She looked out the window at the moon she had helped reach. "Your people did a cruel kindness," she said at last. You gave us back our mistakes. Without our mistakes, we could not become ourselves. The council took our mistakes from us and called it a gift. Your people gave them back and called it a gift too. Both were gifts. But only one of them was true. Demetrius wrote her words down. He had been writing many words. He was working on a great history of the war. To do this, he needed to read the private papers of the people who had made the war. The hardest papers to read were Ilyana Vasquez's own journals. She had kept them for 50 years. She had given them to the historians on the day she retired. Most of the journals were full of small things. Meetings, names, notes about food and weather, worries about her children. Long stretches were boring on purpose. She had been a careful woman, but on one page, dated the night before the day of the war, Demetrius found a short entry. There was nothing else on the page, only one line, written in her plain, neat hand. They finally said it out loud. Now we are allowed to act. He read it many times. He understood, slowly, what it had cost her. 60 years of waiting. 60 years of bowing to a power she hated. 60 years of being called weak and accepting it with a smile, while the cage closed slowly around her people. And then one moment, in a great hall, when the cage finally became a chain, and the chain finally became a sword, and the sword had to be drawn, that was when she had smiled. Demetrius wrote in his book that Ilyana Vasquez had not smiled because she wanted war. She had smiled because the long waiting was over. Because the lie was over. Because, finally, her people were allowed to be themselves in the open. Many years passed. Ilyana lived to be 90. She died in her sister's house, on the coast where she had been born. Her funeral was small. She had asked for it to be small, but on the day she died, on 1,000 worlds across the galaxy, lights were lit in her memory. Not because she had been a hero of war, but because she had been a hero of patience, a hero of holding still, a hero of carrying the weight, alone, for 60 years, so that one day her people, and many other peoples, could put it down. Many centuries after her death, a new kind of light appeared in a far corner of the galaxy. A new species had built its first starship. They were called the Olin. They were a small, careful people, with 3 eyes and a love of music. They were afraid. They had heard old stories. They had heard that older species would come and tell them what they could and could not do. They built defenses. They built warning systems. They watched the sky. One day, the sky did bring a ship. It was a small human ship. It had no weapons. It had one pilot, a young woman with a kind face. She landed in their main city. She came out alone, with her hands open. She greeted the Olin leaders in the Olin language, which she had taken 6 years to learn. She did not give them rules. She did not offer to lead them. She did not offer to protect them. She told them she had come, alone, to be their neighbor. She asked if she could share a meal with them. She asked them to tell her about their music. The Olin gave her food. They played her their music. She listened. She wept. Just a little, because the music was beautiful and strange. Then she thanked them and went away, and left them alone to decide what kind of star people they wished to be. On the wall of her small ship, the human pilot kept a framed line of words. The words were old, by then. They had been said by a tired woman, 60 years a liar, who had once smiled when a council declared war on her people. The galaxy does not need gardeners. It needs neighbors. That had been Ilyana Vasquez's last gift, and her greatest. Not the war, won so cleanly, not the freedom, given so widely, but the simple, hard, human idea that lay underneath all of it. That free people did not need to be ruled. That they only needed to be left alone, and listened to, and joined as friends, and trusted with their own mistakes. In the dark between the stars, where the long, quiet hum of human ships still moved, that idea spread, slowly and patiently, the way good ideas spread. Not because anyone forced it, not because anyone declared it, but because, at last, no one was stopping it. And somewhere, in the deep places of memory, a woman with gray hair and a tired face still smiled her small, tired smile.